All right, we are getting into the message today, and so I am going to kind of be all over the place a little bit. I do apologize for the kind of scatteredness of this message, but we have kind of a lot of things to talk about. So if you'd like to, you can open up to either Luke chapter 16 or you can go to Matthew 25. One of those places will benefit you greatly. So today we're starting a 2-week series called Heart for the House. Okay, so we're going to be talking about stewardship and the heart behind stewardship. We're going to talk about this week. And the next week, we're going to talk about the house and talk about the local church and how God has provided the miracle already within these four walls. And so I'm excited about this, but I just want to kind of say this up front that when I do a stewardship series, it's not because our church is in lack. It's not because I need more of your money. It's just, I think, a good practice each year to build this into our schedule where we just talk about our stuff, our money, and how we're stewarding it, and how we have to realize it's really not ours, it's God's, and we're called to be good stewards. And so we're going to take 2 weeks to discuss this, and I'm looking forward to this. Now, God has given me a message today, and I titled it, Don't Lose Heart. Don't lose heart. I know there's a lot of messages out there, a lot of fear, worry, a lot of talk about lack and what we don't have. And I think we just kind of get fatigued by it. I mean, even good people get down and get discouraged. And so it's important that we realize that we can't lose heart. We can't. We got to continue with what God has called us to do. And so up front, I just want to say, don't lose heart. If you get one thing out of today, you forget everything else I say, don't lose heart. In fact, I think it might be good if you have a phone at home or if you're here, text somebody that needs some encouragement, somebody that maybe they're a little bit down. You don't have to get into their situation. You can just text them, don't lose heart. Or maybe you want to add some more context to that. Tell those around you, don't lose heart. We need to remind each other, and we need to be reminded to stay in it, to stay focused on what God has called us to do, because it's really easy to succumb to all the blows around us that are discouraging. And so I want to say that up front. Don't lose heart. Galatians 6:9 says, "Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." There's a promise here that the little things that we're doing, the good that we're doing, is going to have an effect. Whatever is sown will be reaped. And there is a harvest coming that God is bringing into our lives and into this church. And so we need to keep on. And so, church, don't lose heart. Don't give up. Stay faithful. So we're going to look at the heart today. We're going to look about what is going on in our situation, in our life. And we're going to talk about having a heart for the house. So what do you mean by the house? Well, I'm talking about the house of worship, the local church, what God has given us here in Rio and affect our village communities. God wants us to have a heart for His house, a heart for eternity and the things that are in heaven. So I want to draw your attention as we talk about the heart to 3 questions. And so these are 3 questions that we must answer with our lives. You can't get around these 3 questions. And so we're going to talk about these, kind of help frame the thought today of don't lose heart. The first question I have for you is, where's your heart? Now, I'm not talking under your chest. I'm not talking about that heart. And I'm talking about your mind. I'm talking about all of you. Where's your heart? Where's your heart? What are your thoughts fixed on? Is it fixed on the game that's going to happen later today where the Chiefs will beat the Buccaneers? I don't know. Where's your emotions invested right now? Are you thinking about a relationship that's going well or not going well? Are you thinking about all the things that, are not going right or going right? Where are you putting your energy? What are you trying to fix and make right in your life? That tells you where your heart is. And so I want to ask you that question, where's your heart? Now, I don't normally quote rappers. I don't listen to a lot of rap music. But back in the 90s, there was a guy, and he's still around, named Snoop Dogg. I don't know if you want to Google that name, but you might come up with some interesting quotes of his. But he had a quote that has stuck with me. And it goes like this: He says, I got my mind on my money, and can you guys finish this? And my money is on my mind. Kind of a play on words, but he says, I got my mind on my money and my money on my mind. And he's thinking about money because money's on his head. It's in his head. And when you think about you're living in a place of lack, think of anything. You have a place where you are in need of something. You're thinking about how you're going to get that. And oftentimes, how am I going to get the money to pay for that? How am I going to get this resource to pay for this? And so it's easy to see how money can be a big part of where our heart is. And Jesus, it kind of clues us into this on the things that he chose to talk about. Just in the topic of money and stewardship alone, he devoted a lot of his time to talk about that, and a lot of parables and principles that he gave. And I would ask you, why? Why did he spend so much time on money and possessions? Because he knew that money is on a lot of our minds, and that's where our heart is often at. Now, Jesus taught that the heart is found where one's treasure is placed. He said in Matthew 6:21, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So he's making this connection, wherever your treasure is, that's where your heart's going to be. And so he taught us that there is something connected with these two things that is different than the other things that we think of when we put our heart into. Now, Jesus taught that our heart and treasure can only be in two locations, either on earth or in heaven. And he talked about how if our treasure is stored up on earth, that's where our heart's attention is going to be. That's where our eyes are going to be. That's where we're going to be looking for hope. But he said if your treasure is stored up in heaven, that's where your heart's attention is going to be. And so where's your heart? If you look at your treasure, that's a good indication of where your heart may be. Now, just to be upfront, I don't know how much you guys are giving. I made a pre-decision before I took a lead pastor position that I just didn't want to know people's giving records. So you can have a clear, upfront, I'm not looking at your finances. I don't look at your giving records. And the reason is I don't want to look at you differently. I don't want to favor those that are big givers, I guess. I don't want to look at disapproval with those that are not giving or low givers. I just want to look at you, love you like I'm called to do that and to teach you and direct you. And so I don't want that to get in the way. So just up front, I don't know your giving records. So I'm just talking to you like I would talk to anybody about giving. Now, I wanted to bring to you some statistics on giving and spending, and kind of to show you what the average person is kind of like, and maybe even what the average Christian is like, and hopefully it'll kind of help you to figure out kind of where you're at when it comes to where your treasure is and where your heart is. Now, I think I have it up there on the PowerPoint there, Jesse, of the spending breakdown. Now, I don't know if you're going to be able to see all of this. You may have to really, get close to the computer there or TV. But this is a breakdown of kind of the average American's spending habits. And this is from 2018, and it kind of breaks it down, I think, in an interesting way. And I just want to give you the top 10 things. And I want you to see, where is their treasure? Is it in heaven or on earth? So the number one expense that people have or that they spend is on shelter. Go figure. It's on your house at $11,747. That's a lot. Then comes pension and Social Security, and that's kind of your retirement, what comes after your career. And that's at $6,831. I won't read all the numbers here, but the number 3 is just on food at home, so your grocery bill. Number 4 is on the utility to pay for your house. So you got all sorts of utilities. Phone is included, and heat or electricity and water. And then number 5 is your vehicle purchases. Number 6 is food away from home. So that's like fast food restaurants. Number 7 is health insurance. Number 8 is entertainment. Number 9 is other vehicle expenses, so I'm guessing that's your insurance, maintenance costs, those kind of things. And then number 10 is other house expenses. Okay, so that's the top 10. Now, based on the spending habits of the average American, would you say that their treasure is in heaven or on earth? Well, all this spending is earthly, isn't it? It's all in this life. And in fact, I would say most of our spending is basically on the here and now and not so much on what is to come. Now, does this help you see kind of where your heart may be at? That it may be more earthly than it is heavenly. And I think that that is hard to get away from. But our spending can kind of reveal that. Now, there's a category here that is really difficult to see, so I actually am going to zoom this up on the next slide. And it's this cash contributions per year. Can you guys see it? Kind of on the bottom right there, it's that number that says $1,888. Can you guys see it? All right, so that's the cash contribution. So that means money that's going out of your pocket to something else that doesn't have to do with you. Okay, so in the large scheme of things, that's kind of a big number, I guess. You know, if I wrote a check for that, I'd feel that. But it kind of breaks down to this percentage that I want to show you that is 2.5% of their total income is spent in giving to charity. So that's the average American. That's not Christian here. That's just how consumers are. Now, how much would you say Christians contribute to their local church? Get this 2.5%. Would it be higher or lower? Well, according to the nonprofit source, another research company that tracks charitable giving in churches, they say that Christians give the same as consumers spend on charitable giving, 2.5%. It's not all that different from the world. And if we dig a little deeper, it kind of gets more clear. And that is 5% of Christians tithe. That means giving 10% of their income. Only 5% of Christians actually tithe as a habit. And 80% give 2% of their income to their local church. So it's really not 2.5%. It's mostly 2% that Christians give, with the exception of the 5% that do the heavy giving of tithing. Now, if we dig a little bit, I mean, we've dug kind of deep already, but just to kind of put this in perspective, if you go through history, like one of the worst events that happened in America, the Great Depression, research has shown that they gave 3.3%. Christians did 3.3% during the Great Depression. Now, times are different now. I think we'd agree that we're in a much better place, and so you would think that the giving would increase, but it's not the case. And even rich people, or what we would consider rich, which for my example, I'll say those that are over $75,000. You're rich to me, at least. If you just look at that, those that make $75,000 or more in America only give 1% of their income. Now, they're probably giving more money, but when it comes to the percentage, it's actually far less. And so just because you're rich doesn't mean you're necessarily going to give more. Now, where is their heart? Well, we would say their heart is on their money, and their money is on their heart. They are trying to make more money, so why would they give more of it away? But where's your heart? Well, show me where your spending goes, and I'll kind of show you a little bit more about where your heart is. And if it looks like the average Christian and consumer, it's about 98% on earthly things and 2% on heavenly things. Now, we're going to burst this wide open, and part of me is like, okay, I got a handful of people here at the church, okay? So you could walk out. But for those online, I don't have to worry about you walking out on me. You could always close the browser or turn off the TV if you get sick of it. But I need to kind of step into this because I want to show you a little bit more about where your heart may be. And about our church, too. Now, I'm not a scientist, not a mathematician, I don't do taxes, so I'm not an expert, but I did my own little research from our 2019 directory. So if you're a part of that, you're part of this number, but some of you guys may not be, and so I didn't include you. But we had about 61 households represented in that 2019 directory. So 61, I want you to pay attention to that number because if we were to take the average income of $75,000 and let's just say we had an average giving church of 2.5% was giving, okay? We would have about $114,000 per year coming in through tithes and offerings. 114,000 would be coming in. Last year, we just closed out the calendar year. We had, and I could be wrong, Bruce, you could correct me, but 116,000. So 114,000 would be the average of 2.5%. 116,000 is where we came in. So, you could say, hey, we're average, but it gets even better. There's good news in this, okay? I'm not here to put bad news in it. But it gets better because if we add missions and other giving, fundraising that we did, whether through for the youth group, Speed the Light, BGMC, or even the Script gift card program, we had about 25,000 more that came in. So I would say our church is doing pretty well. And if you're wanting the percentage of that, that's 3.1% is the average that we have of those 61 households. Are you still with me? All right. So 3.1% is the average giving, and I don't like to talk about numbers because it's kind of boring to me, but if you compare that to the Great Depression, they were at 3.3%. Okay, so even though we're doing well above average of the average American consumer and average Christian, I still think that tells us that we have some room to grow our hearts towards the heavenly things, towards things that God is wanting us to do, and sharing the gospel, making sure that missionaries are supported, making sure our communities are being reached. And so this is more of a reality check to say this is kind of where our heart is. If you look at what Jesus said, with where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So look at your spending. What does that tell you about your heart? It doesn't tell you everything, but it is a key indicator because Jesus spent an awful lot of time talking about money and possessions. So where's your heart? You must answer that with your life. The second question I have for you is, where's your treasure? Now, February is typically the time when we're preparing our taxes. We have a tax professional that helps us, but it's kind of a time where you're collecting all the important documents you need, the W-2s, the financial records, you're getting the bank account statements, the receipts, and so hopefully you're organized and that's easy for you. But for a lot of us, man, that is a big chore, just trying to figure out where did our money go last year. Because you want to know who wants answers to this question of where's your treasure? Uncle Sam does. He wants to know where's your treasure and how much it was, because we want to tax you. We want our take of that. But it's something we do every February. It's kind of it's routine for working adults. And so we keep our treasure in banks, and we keep it under our couch cushions and piggy banks. But after this taxing thing is done, that money that's left over, that's our treasure. That's kind of what we're able to take and count on spending for the rest of the year. Now, this treasure, whether it's streams of income from a job, investments, and sales, it's not really ours, is it? It belongs to God. It's like we make the money, but it's really not our money, and not just that we're giving some of our money to God. It's God's, and He says so throughout Scriptures. One in the Old Testament that comes to mind is Psalms 50, verses 9 through 11. He says, I have no need for a bull from your stall, or a goat from your pens. Meaning, I don't need your money. For every beast of the forest is mine. It's all mine. The cattle on 1,000 hills. I know every bird in the mountains, and the creatures of the fields are mine. So God doesn't need to be reminded of what's His, but we do, because we get fooled into thinking it's my money. God gave you the money, and I made the money from my job. God gave you the job. Well, I spent my hard time making the money. God gave you the time. It's like we have to remind ourselves that our treasure is not ours. It all belongs to God. Now, I want to ask you the question, where's your treasure? And I might rephrase that. Where's God's treasure? Because that's what we're going to be held account to. Hebrews 2:10 says, everything belongs to God, and all things were created by His power. It's all His. Money and possessions, what Jesus spent time talking and preaching about frequently, it was because it's all God's, and we need to be reminded of it, that we are stewards of it. Now, He used parables to help connect with people, because I think people like you and me, we tend to connect with stories and characters And when somebody just says it right out, it doesn't quite hit or land where it needs to. So Jesus liked to interact with people's hearts through stories and help to plant seeds there that would grow into righteous living. And so he told these parables of how treasure and the human heart are connected. Now you'll notice most of these parables God is depicted as like the owner, and mankind is presented as a steward or a manager or a servant, somebody who's managing God's possessions. Now Jesus, without question, teaches that God owns it all, and we are managers to give account to him of our management. So there's two parables that I kind of want to zero in on today as we talk about our hearts. In Luke 16, Jesus uses a parable about a dishonest or bad manager who mismanages this guy's accounts. And so it goes in verse 1, he says, "There was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought to him that this man was wasting his possessions. And he called him and said to him, 'What is this I hear about you? Turn in your accounts of your management, for you can no longer be manager.' Now this manager was mismanaging his master's resources and rightly was let go." It's kind of like, open and shut case, nothing to see here. But he does something after he has his conversation with the manager, with the owner. He said, or it said that he went off and he made some deals behind the rich man's back. So all these accounts that he had, he decided to close the accounts by offering them a deal they could not refuse. Said to one, "Hey, how about you turn in 50%, or how about you turn in your debts, and I'll take 50% off." The guy's like, "Well, yeah, I'll give you, if I can pay off my debts, I'll give you the 50%. And to another one, he says, "Hey, I'll take off 20%, just turn in your debts." So the guy turns in 80% of what he owed. And so right before he leaves, now why does he do this? Well, Jesus makes the point that he's trying to earn friendships for when he's unemployed, because he's like, I can't dig, I can't do hard labor, I don't want to go back in the workforce. So he's basically making a cushion for him to land with these, to making his reputation good, so these people will treat him well. And Jesus says that the rich man commended him on his dishonesty. Now, Jesus liked to use humor. Sometimes we don't catch it all the time, but I think he was using humor here that the people would have got. Because he's talking to people that are poor, people that don't know what it's like to have a lot of money. And so when they're saying that the rich man, and his dealings with this bad manager and the bad manager's response, I could see the people chuckling, saying that's kind of funny that this guy's just, basically, causing the rich man to lose a lot of his money so that he can look good after he's unemployed. And I think because the rich, are often perceived as, and I think rightly so, not all of them, but they're doing everything within their legal means to make more money. I don't see people like, let's say a large company like Amazon that made a lot of money over the last year. I don't see them crying over the fact that they're making a lot of money. In fact, I think they use the laws that are there to make themselves more money. So this rich man probably did a lot of things that we would probably consider a little bit shady, a little bit close to make his money. And so he's commending this bad manager for basically being dishonest and kind of being really, really good at being a bad manager, and kind of something that he would kind of see that's kind of funny. Another thing about this is this bad manager did all of this for this life, for the here and now. He was willing to leverage this former employer for the next few years that he had. He was trying to do all this to make his living bearable. It also shows us that he was pretty generous with this rich man's money. And I thought about if we were here today, I was going to have you get your wallets out and then hand it to the person next to you, and then that person could do your giving. Because I think we would be more generous with a rich man's money than our own, because after all, he can just make more money, right? Is he really going to miss, whatever this bad manager mismanaged? He'll probably just make it back. So I think there was some humor in what Jesus was sharing, because if we're honest, we don't blame this guy. It's like, sure, You got to do what you got to do to survive. This rich man could just make more money. But this rich man, or this guy, knew that he wouldn't be able to be friends with his former employer, so he made friends with the people that were around him. And it was something that Jesus commented because he was doing it for this life. And he makes the contrast that how much more should we be generous with what God is God's, his money, and we should mismanage it in a positive way by being generous. Hey, give 50% of it away to this person, 20% away to this person, because we want to have the friendships in heaven. We want a warm welcome when we get to heaven of all the people that we bless and how much that they appreciate our generosity. So Jesus makes this as a contrast of how much more should we be generous with God's money, because he can just make more of it. He's God. All of it's his. And so why do we get so worked up when we have a little bit that leaves our hands? Now, he brings this to a close with this application in verse 10. He says, one who is faithful in a very little is also faithful in much. And one who is dishonest in a very little is also dishonest in much. If then you have not been faithful in the unrighteous wealth, who will entrust to you the true riches? And if you have not been faithful in that which is another's, who will give you that which is your own? No servant can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. When the managers work for the rich man, they're treating people poorly because they're trying to get money for this rich man. But when push comes to shove and they have to choose between one or the other, they're going to choose the love of people. They're going to choose to them rather than the rich man. So where's your heart? Where's your treasure? Those are questions that you must give an account for with your life. The final question that I have for you today is, where's your hope? The second parable is found in Matthew 25, and we're going to look at verses 40 through 30. I'm not going to read it all. I'm going to more summarize this parable because I think there's enough familiarity with it that if you've heard it, you could be able to go there and read it for yourself. But it's a story of a man that goes on a long journey, and he gives three talents, or three servants talents, or a sum of money that they would be entrusted with while he's on this long journey to a faraway land. And so to one he gives 5 talents, and to another he gives 2 talents, and to the third he gives 1 talent. Now, a talent was a weight of money that some would say that's 15 to 20 years of daily wages. So it was a lot of money, but it was a weight. So just think of a big bag of coins. They used silver back in the day called denarii coins. So it's a lot of coin to manage in a big bag. And so one guy had 5 bags, one guy had 2 bags, one guy had 1 bag. A lot of money. And so what's amazing is that 2 of these servants in this story actually double their master's money. And so they came back and they reported what they did, and man, he's like, well done, good and faithful servants, come and enjoy your master's happiness. And he's very pleased when he came back and he saw what they had done with what they had been given. But the third says that he dug a hole and buried this talent, or this bag of money. I don't know when he did it, but it sounds like he immediately went and just buried it, said, I'm not going to do anything with it, and left it. And when the master came, and he knew he had to give back the money, well, he knew where it was. He didn't lose it. He went, unburied the money, and returned it to him. And he said, Master, he said, I knew that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown, gathering where you had not scattered seed. So I was afraid, and went out and hid your gold in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. Okay, so there's a few things here we could dig into, but I'm not. I'm not going to kind of spend a lot of time on it because it kind of says exactly what he did. He was afraid. He went and he hid the money because he didn't think that he could really do much with it, or he didn't really think that he was worth putting all that effort in to make him more money. So he just gave back whatever he gave him, and he thought that that would be fine. Verse 26, we see the master's response, and it's kind of over the top. And you have to remember, this is Jesus, okay? So they're not words that we would think that Jesus would say, but nonetheless, we see him as the master, and he says, "You wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gathered where I had not scattered seed. Well then, you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest." That's the minimum that you could have done. It's just to put it in a bank where they could have done something with the money in the meantime, and at least I would have earned interest. But instead, you buried it. You hid it away. Verse 28, so the bag of gold from him, so take the bag of gold from him and give it to the one who has 10 bags. For whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them, and thrown, that worthless servant, outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Okay, so we see this, and it's kind of like a harsh response, kind of over the top. And I'm thinking, well, he didn't lose your money. He returned it just as it was. Why is he getting such a harsh rebuke or a harsh response? And Jesus is showing us something here. But we don't see it if we just look at this parable. You actually have to look at the one before it and the one after it, because he's doing a string of parables before he gets to the crucifixion. So these are his last parables, and he's talking about how he's going to leave, and he's going to come back at his second coming for his bride, the church, for Christians. He's going to come back for them. And at that time, they're going to have to give account for their lives, and they're going to need to be ready. So in the previous parable, he talked about 10 virgins when he was saying the bridegroom left and he would come back, and they needed to have oil left in their lamp. And so 5 of them had oil left in their lamp. They were prepared. They were ready because they knew he was going to come back. But the other 5 had wasted it, had spent it, and they weren't ready. And so he draws this distinction that you need to be ready for when I return. Then he gets to the parable of the talents. And we see again the same kind of going away and then coming back and then giving an account for how we've used. But in the first one, it was just preserving what you've been given. Well, that's what the second guy did, right? In the second parable, he preserved what he had, and he gave back whatever he had. But then we get to the third one, and the third one is where he is at the judgment seat of Christ, and he is separating the goats from the sheep. And he says, the goats did not feed me, clothe me, visit me, give me a drink of water when I was thirsty. They didn't see my need, and they didn't fulfill it. But the sheep, they did all those things. They saw me, and they met my needs. And so we see these kind of grouped together, and he's sharing this point with us that we need to be ready. We cannot lose what we've been given, but we must give an account for what we've been given, and to share it, to use it, to multiply it, to do everything we can in this time and in this life, this earthly life, for the one to come. And so he's not talking about money here. He's not talking about money. It's really not about money. It's not. It's about your heart. And I don't want to be cliche about this, but it's about your heart, what you are bringing to God. And so when we have faith in Christ, we are saying your finished work is how I'm going to get to heaven. That's how I'm going to have my name written in your book. And so we are doing that by faith. Faith is in the heart. It doesn't have to do with your works. It doesn't have to do with you making more money for God or you doing a good job and being good enough for Him. Jesus fulfilled all of that. So what's He saying here? He's not saying this is how you're going to get to heaven. He's saying this is how I want you to live. I want you to live ready for my second coming. I want you to live prepared for eternity, because that's what really matters. We should be changing the way that we look at our money, looking at our possessions, not as ours and giving a little bit here and there, but as God's, to be able to be used as He sees fit to increase His glory, to increase His kingdom, and to better prepare for when He comes. Now, we live in a world that their heart is deeply connected to treasure, and it's leading them to be consumed with earthly things. And it's hard to talk about eternal things because it seems so far away, it seems so distant. But Christians, we need to be different. We need to realize that God has entrusted us whatever we have. To some, that have been given much, we look at them and say, kind of judge them more harshly. But for those who have been given little, don't overlook it, because God has given you that to use as well. Remember, Jesus commended the widow who gave out of her poverty. She gave what she had, the 2 pennies. Jesus doesn't care about how much. He cares about the heart. He cares about how we look at God and we believe and trust Him. And the best way that He can get to our heart is to show us where we're spending, show us where our treasure really is. So the applications I have for you to consider as you're at home is to, number one, and really if this is what you got out of today, that's fine with me. But don't lose heart. Whatever you have to do to stay in it, stay in it. Do it. Get around people that can encourage you. Get in the Scripture, get in the Word, pray, seek God. Whatever you do, don't lose heart. That's a lot of it, just showing up and being available and not losing your heart. Preserve it, keep the faith. Second thing that I encourage you to do is to manage God's resources, to actually change the way that you see your finances, and to be looking at what you have, not as yours to keep and to hold for this life, but to leverage this and say, God, how do you want to utilize this for eternity? What does that look like? When we see somebody in need and we have something that they have need of, we should not question that. We should say, it's yours. And because it's not about them, it's about seeing Christ. It's about seeing the things that He wants. And if our hearts are fixed on eternity and managing God's resources, we'll see it differently. We won't miss those opportunities as much. Finally, I want to encourage you to be ready. Are you ready for Christ's return? I did a series back in September, about Revelation, in the book of Revelations, and how it's going to unfold. And we're told that He's coming back, and we are living in some strange times. We're living in the end time. Whether you believe it or not, Jesus approached it like that, and we need to approach it like that. That at any moment He could come like a thief in the night, and we will have to stand ready. We'll have to go wherever we buried our life, whatever we buried the resources that God gave us to use. We're going to have to uncover that and present it to Him. And He will know whether you're a goat, whether you're a sheep, whether you're really His or you're just His in name only. He doesn't care what your status is on Facebook, that, I'm a Christian. He doesn't care what you've told people and what you're known as. The only reputation that really counts is one that God sees of you. And so Him as the one who will be at the judgment seat, we're all going to have to stand before Him. We're all going to have to answer these questions. Where was your heart, Shaun? Where was your treasure, Shaun? Where was your hope, Shaun? And those are the things that I'll have to give account for, and each of you will have to give account for. So the best way you can be ready is to put your faith and trust in Him today. So wherever you're at today, whether you've given your life to Jesus, or whether you've kind of deviated a little bit and you haven't really given your heart, today you can come back to Him. So wherever you're at today, would you just do me a favor and bow your heads, close your heart, or close your eyes, and bring your heart to Him. Make an altar space wherever you're at today, in the sound of my voice, and come before the Lord. Pray a simple prayer like this. Dear Jesus, I know that the things I have are yours. They're not mine. Help me to see what you've given into my care. Help me to return to you, to give you my heart. Help me to have faith and trust you with my life. And help me to set my eyes upon you, upon eternity. Help me today to come to trust you with my life and to place my faith in you. Help me to be ready when you return. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. God is starting something in your life today, even if it's just a simple reminder to say, hey, I've given you it all. And there's nothing that you lack that God cannot provide for. And in this series, as we've talked about the heart, we're just kind of starting it today. Next week, we're going to talk about the church and how it has an important role in not only meeting the needs of the local believers, but also in spreading the gospel to all who may hear. We are living in the last days, and we need to be a church that is motivated to make use of what God has given us, to leverage our resources for Him. It's not about a physical building. We're managing this, we're taking care of this, but ultimately it's God's. And we want to use whatever building, whatever we own, whatever money that we have as a church to see how we can further His gospel and how we can fulfill this mission of reaching our villages and seeing lives change. Thanks for joining us today. We hope you enjoy this message. Remember to like, comment, or share. It helps it spread to other people. And we hope to see you back next week. God bless you.